Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Today I'd like to spend some time talking about just a few of the many excellent comments that have come in over the last few weeks, and also to pass along some items of interest that I think you'll enjoy. I want to do this ahead of starting another big arc. We're going to talk about 1972 and the Carl and the Passions album, hopefully beginning next week, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on. To kick off, I wanted to get back to 2000's odd tracks by Beach Boys and Beach Boy members. As I said when I did those episodes, some of it's kind of a judgment call what to leave in and what to leave out. But I realized there was one track that definitely should have been included that I omitted. Going back to April of 2004, in issue number 64 of the Endless Summer Quarterly, there is a CD called One in a Million, which is a tribute to Dennis Wilson. The CD contains David Mark's version of Dennis's You and I, and tracks from Billy Hinchy, Justin and Carl B. Wilson, Alan Boyd, and Stephen Kalinich, among many others. The main track of interest here is a new version of California Saga by Alan Jardine. According to the notes inside the issue, Al recorded it late in 1996. According to the Endless Summer Quarterly, Al's adaptation has an earthy soul that the 1973 Holland translation didn't encompass. Subtlety. According to Al, as quoted in the issue, I wanted to do a more laid-back and soulful version of California Saga. It has more of a Willie Nelson kind of feel that gives a person pause to think about the lyrics. I was thinking about him and his style because I respect him so much. Al went on that, this new approach gives me a direction. I might even consider a whole project in that country-inspired sentimental way, taking standards and recording them in that idiom. The track does sound very much like Willie Nelson. It's taken at an extremely leisurely pace. The backing is simple, gentle acoustic guitar played with a slightly Latin flavor. Al does all the playing and singing, backing himself with a harmony vocal on the chorus. This approach works slightly less well on the choruses, which call for a little more rhythm in the water, get yourself in the cool, clear water sections. That's a very minor point. It has the feel of someone playing and singing around a campfire very late on a beautiful night. It runs 5 minutes and 3 seconds, which the leisurely, relaxed pace requires, and fades out among briefly used ocean wave effects. It's certainly a real departure from the Holland original, and from the Postcard from California version with Neil Young. It's all very simple and very nice, a really enjoyable track. I hope it'll get a wider release someday because it deserves to be heard. Actually, I'll bet Al has a lot of really interesting and nice tracks stashed around from over the years. It would be cool to see him put together an archival solo release one of these days. And also speaking of Al, I thought it was interesting on the back of Endless Summer Quarterly number 64, there's an ad for disc makers with a testimonial from Al saying that they put together his Live in Las Vegas CDs and PT Cruiser CD singles, meeting and in many cases exceeding his expectations. The illustration shows both PT Cruiser covers that I've seen photos of. I've still never seen one in real life though. Maybe Al only had 1,000 pressed in order to get that $990 deal shown in the ad. Going all the way back to episode 18 on Carl Wilson's solo work, Toaster 2 pointed out that former Guess Who frontman Burton Cummings provided backing vocals on 2 tracks on Carl Wilson's 1983 album Youngblood. He's on the title track and also on Rockin' All Over the World. The liner notes on this album are extremely scant, so I wasn't aware of that. Thanks for pointing it out. Moreover, Toaster 2 let me know that Carl provided backing vocals on Burton Cummings' 1984 album Heart, which was a Canada-only release. I'm quite a fan of Burton Cummings anyway. Having Carl on the album makes it sound really interesting. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, it's Canadian only and seems to be a pretty obscure release anyway. The prices I'm seeing for used copies are pretty high. Fortunately, I live not too far from the border, and with pandemic travel restrictions easing, I'm hoping to get over to Canada in the next couple of months sometime for a little record shopping. Maybe I can turn up a copy a little more reasonably priced, or at least save the shipping charges. By the way, if anybody happens to know of a good used vinyl store, or several, in Toronto, please let me know. I know Joel Goldenberg is in Montreal, but he's pretty well connected. Joel, any suggestions for used vinyl in Toronto, or certainly anybody else out there? Thanks, and also thanks Toaster2 for letting me know about that album. If I turn up a copy, I will be sure to let you know if you can hear Carl on it or what I think of it anyway. Moving on to the Stephen Kalinich episodes, following up on that, I heard from the ever-reliable with great information Martin Steele about a 2017 documentary, Shortcuts to Infinity, The Poetry of Stephen Kalinich, directed by Chris Allen. It's a fascinating film featuring interviews with Stephen Kalinich and many of his cohorts, including P.F. Sloan, Brian Wilson, Al Jardine, David Marks, and many others. There's a very positive feeling to the entire film. It's amazing, uplifting, and inspiring, which is exactly appropriate for a film about Stephen Kalinich. If you enjoyed those episodes with Steve Kalinich, I'm sure you realized, like I did, that we were only able to hit the tip of a very interesting iceberg. This documentary will take you a little bit deeper, explain a little bit more about his background and many of the fascinating things he's been involved in. It's really great. I urge you to check it out. I will leave information on how you can view the documentary and where you can buy a DVD if you'd like in the comments section. Moving on to the recent episodes about Almost Summer, I got a lot of great information and feedback on Celebration from a lot of viewers, particularly from Ken Alvis and Peter Flegg. I'm going to save the specifics of their comments until we talk about the Celebration album, which I'm hoping to do sometime early in the new year. Specifically regarding the Almost Summer movie, John Hammond mentioned that in one scene, the character Felicia, played by Karen Lamb, who was twice married to Dennis Wilson around this time, is carrying a red folder with Beach Boys scrawled on the back of it, something I had never noticed. Ranger Girl reminded me that Bruno Kirby also appeared as Clemenza in The Godfather Part 2. Of course, Bruno Kirby had far too long a list of credits to cover all of them, but I definitely shouldn't have overlooked that one. Betamax Blocker pointed out that Dee Dee Khan was also on Shining Time Station as Stacy Jones from 1989 to 1993, with Ringo Starr as Mr. Conductor from 1989 to 1991, and George Carlin as Mr. Conductor from 1991 to 1993. Thanks to everybody for that information. Also, Betamax Blocker has a very cool channel here on YouTube with interesting and entertainingly done reviews of Beach Boy records, also the Beatles. Check that out if you haven't. I think you'll really enjoy it. I really got a laugh out of James Watson's comment about the Almost Summer movie. He said that as I was describing it, he kept thinking that it sounded familiar. He finally realized that he had watched it on YouTube a few months back and had forgotten he'd seen it. As James put it, its forgettableness doesn't speak well for it, I guess. So if somebody is describing a movie you don't remember, it might be Almost Summer. Also on that episode, I said that I could not understand the final line of the third verse of the movie version of the Almost Summer song. I put out a call to Willie Minix of Minix Music, who has a great ear for figuring out lyrics, and he came through. The full final verse of the movie version of the song is, Christine and Bobby, you know they were lovers, and then they went their separate ways. It wound up when they ran for student body president, they both won on election day. Thanks for that, Willie. I knew we could count on you, and I'm just glad you're using your superpowers for good instead of evil. Moving on to the Endless Summer soundtrack album, Kev Sable pointed out that Island Girl from the soundtrack album is also on Charles Lloyd's 1978 album Weavings. Tom Monson pointed out that the Almost Summer soundtrack has never been released on CD. He did find the title track only on the 1993 compilation CD Guilty Pleasures, the Music You Hate to Love. Like so much in the 90s, this CD is so draped in irony that it's impossible to tell if the people compiling it loved these songs or hated them. Maybe they didn't even know themselves. It was a confusing time. The cover certainly makes it look like something you would only buy ironically, if at all. The liner notes by rock journalist Dawn Eden are full of snark and sarcasm with some seeming affection mixed in, but again, it's the 90s, so it's hard to tell. Of the final track on the CD, Almost Summer, she says, "What better way to end the music you hate to love than with the love you love to hate? Mike Love and Celebration, parentheses, I wonder if he ever thought they'd be bigger than the Beach Boys, end paren, with Almost Summer. the theme from the 1978 bikini-sploitation film of the same name. In the almost summer of that year, this song went to number 28 on the Hot 100. I kid you not. Oh well, you've got to give the guy credit for being the first songwriter since Roger Christian to use the word hearse in a summer tune. And in the first line, no less. The poor hack who produced this super schlock also deserves credit for compressing Mike's noxious nasalities so much that he sounds like Joey Levine. It's nice to see that somebody out there preserved bubblegum traditions during the dark days of disco. Wasn't that 90s attitude fun? Am I being sarcastic? We may never know. Incidentally, if the name Joey Levine didn't ring a bell for you, it didn't for me. He was the vocalist on Yummy 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 by the Ohio Express in 1968, Life is a Rock but the Radio Rolled Me by Reunion in 1974, and Quick Joey Small by the Casonet's Cat Singing Orchestra from 1968, which is the first track on the CD and probably the reason he was used for comparison here. Other tracks on the CD include Magic by Pilot, Washington Square by the Village Stompers, Blue Velvet by Bobby Vinton, Pandora's Golden Heebie-Jeebies by the Association, and a bunch of other tunes whose only unifying theme is that people might find them annoying. Michael Lukens let us know that there's an unofficial CD version of 1981's Looking Back with Love that includes Almost Summer, Cruisin', It's Okay, sung by Dave Robinson, and Sad Sad Summer as hidden unlisted bonus tracks. As you can see from this picture of the disc, it's on something called Mid-Valley Records. And the disc shows the title as Looking Back with Mike. I don't believe Looking Back with Love with or without bonus tracks has ever been officially released on CD either. Whether or not that's much of a loss is a subject for another episode. We also talked about regional versions of the Almost Summer song. I'm sure there are versions for Los Angeles, New York, and Detroit, and I was pretty sure there are others. Ranger Girl confirmed that there are Cleveland and San Francisco versions. I suspect there are still more. If anybody has any additional information or has seen a complete listing or a more complete listing, please pass that along. On episode 136, The Honeys in the 60s Part 1, George Heehan passed along that the Honeys reunited on one of Carney Wilson's short-lived reality shows. He thinks it might have been Carney Wilson Unstapled, and performed their 1963 song Shoot the Curl, with Carney's husband Ron Bonfiglio and band providing backing. Carney Wilson Unstapled ran for 9 episodes between January 14th and March 11th, 2010 on, weirdly, the Game Show Network. I haven't been able to find that clip or even confirm that this is the show where that took place. If anybody has any additional information or knows how to access a clip of this, please pass that along. Also, I really enjoyed Matthew Schaefer's comment that when he played Shoot the Curl for a bunch of college buddies back in the early 90s, one of them thought they were singing Shoot the Girl. Once again, those 90s were a very confusing time. And speaking of mistakes, Jeff McDaniel pointed out that while talking about the wild sax solo in Pray for Surf, I accidentally started referring to it as Shoot the Curl. I meant Pray for Surf. Thanks for catching that, Jeff. Andrew Doe passed along that he had spoken to studio photographer Jasper Daly back in 1985, and that Mr. Daly had told him that he had inspired the title of Brian's song that was the B-side of Pray for Surf, Hide Go Seek. Jasper Daly began photographing celebrities as a hobby in the early 60s when he was already in his 50s. Surprisingly, rather than photographing Sinatra or Betty Grable or Bob Hope, he began by photographing Sonny and Cher. He reportedly went on to photograph the Mamas and the Papas, the Turtles, the Association, the Doors, and of course the Beach Boys. Among other things, he was responsible for many of the candid shots that we've all seen that were taken around the time of the Smile Sessions. Brian also recruited Daly to sing lead on the very odd track Teeter Totter Love, recorded during the Smile Sessions and released on the 2011 box set. Andrew says that Jasper Daly told him that he loved kiddie games, as he called them, and suggested titles like Teeter Totter Love and Hide Go Seek to Brian. Andrew says that his impression of Jasper Daly was that he was a lovely guy. Brian certainly seems to have thought highly of him. Jasper Daly passed away in 1998. I should mention that we're coming into a weird period here in the basement. Next week, I want to start a deep dive into the year 1972, looking at the first and second quarters of the year, then do a deep dive into Carl and the Passion So Tough, and then wind up with the third and fourth quarters. Now, in the past, when we've done this, it's been pretty much consecutive, just all the way through. This time, I think, as most of you have heard, there is happily news that a new Beach Boy archival box set, Sail on Sailor 1972, is, as I'm recording this, scheduled for release on November 18th, 2022. Obviously, we'll want to take a break to discuss that, so it might take some reshuffling of episodes. Having seen a track listing, I'm resisting the urge to talk about it right now. I also wanted to talk about Christmas records on the December 22nd show, as I have in the past, so that might also require another little break. I wanted to use the last week of the year to do something off topic the way we did last year with George Harrison's All Things Must Pass album. This time I wanted to talk about Wings, Back to the Egg, and McCartney 2. I'm going to have to push that out into January at least. I guess it's a good thing to have too much to talk about here. Additionally, I'm working my way through David Leaf's great update of his essential book, God Only Knows, the story of Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys, and the California Myth. I'm really enjoying it, seeing a lot of things I want to investigate further, and I'm sure I'll want to talk about it sometime in the coming weeks. And speaking of Beach Boys books, there's another very different set of volumes that have been around for a while, but I only recently became aware of them. It's the Beach Boys Archives, compiled by Gary Zenker and the interestingly named Torrance Berry. Each one of these 8 volumes reprints Beach Boys ephemera from all phases of their careers. It's all helpfully labeled where it came from at the top of each page. Find that very nice. I love this kind of stuff because I like so much to put things in the pop cultural context of the times and really capture the flavor of the times in which the music was made. And I'll tell you, if I spent the rest of my life looking for old magazines, press releases, fan club paraphernalia, tour books, and ads, I would never come up with as much good stuff as is contained in these 8 volumes. And even if I did, those originals I'm sure would take up all the space in the entire house. If you want to see what a labor of love looks like, look no further than these volumes. Gary has also compiled or contributed to volumes on The Monkees, David Cassidy, KRLA Radio, Jan and Dean, and the Beatles. And that's where we'll leave it for now. Once again, thank you for all the great feedbacks, comments, and support. That's what really makes this worthwhile. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to more of it. Even in an episode running as long as this one, we can only hit the highlights and touch on just a few things. Thanks for all the support and feedback. Please keep it coming. Next time we will embark on 1972. As I say, we may have to jump away happily for some other Beach Boy related items. Please hit like and subscribe if you don't mind. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time to embark on 1972. Bye.